Well met and happy Sunday, my darling travelers. How are we doing? Welcome to Tales by Tankardlight, episode 2. And we're having a guest. So, with all that being said and done, let us go live. Why the volume so low? Am I low? Testing. Let's move on. I'm not low, but I'm blurry. So let me fix that. And I know exactly how to fix that. And you guys should be able to hear Minion now on stream as well.
Hello.
Hi. There we go. Is the volume so low? I'm not changing anything, mate. I haven't changed a single thing on my end. I haven't changed one single thing. Maybe I'm quieter than usual, which would be a first. Anyway,
Definitely.
with all that being said and done, and hopefully no more gremlins to deal with for the time being, welcome, my darling travelers, to episode 2 of Tales by Tankardlight with our very own minion of Discord. And for those of you unfortunate enough to not know you, Minion, please feel free to tell us who you are, what you're doing on Twitch, and a little bit about yourself.
Oh my goodness, what am I doing on Twitch? Well, that's a really good question. I'm a variety streamer. Mostly I do music and I do mostly cozy games, although occasionally I will do something kind of different, like Goat Simulator, which is the current favorite. About me, well, I've cogent to this particular subject. I've been Wiccan since 1977, which is a while ago, I guess. Currently head of a tradition and involved with a bunch of different groups currently, and that's about it. Unless you have any specific questions.
Thanks for that. Also, guys, if you are not following the lovely Minion, and if you can tell from that cheeky little guitar neck from behind her, Minion is also a fellow musician. So do make sure to drop her a cheeky little follow. For those of you lucky enough to not know yours truly, I am Kogayonum, most often called Kogai, Koga, or Get the Hell Out of My Chat, a variety streamer originally from Romania, now residing in UK, hence the Bond villain accent. And even though I usually dabble in music and fantasy and historical work, I am a trained historian, and my field of study is the history of what people usually call para-religious phenomenology, because saying that we're specialized in the history of magic gives us funny looks. We won't be reading off every chat message, but we'll be keeping an eye on chat. So feel free to drop your questions. I do have a few questions from Instagram for Minion. I do have a few questions that some of my community members dropped on Discord. And because I am a nerd, I did reserve the right to write down a couple of questions for Minion myself. Only 20. Nice. In the spirit of keeping things clean and under 6 hours. So, with all that being said and done, any opening statements, Minion, or can I begin the questioning, the Inquisition?
Oh dear. Oh dear. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Of course, that was a mandatory quip. I also must say that I reserve the right to exit stage left, just letting you know. Go ahead, do your worst. I am ready.
Okay. Let's start off slow. So you started this path in 1977, when most Americans still pictured witches via Bewitched reruns and Hammer horror films. What pulled you toward Wicca specifically, and what did you actually expect to find versus what you actually found?
Well, we could spend the entire time of this stream on that question. Um, well, I had just arrived in the UK in 1977, and it was, of course, where Wicca started. The current manifestations, and what drew me to it previously was the whole idea that duality of deity is a thing rather than just um, the patriarchal god archetype that a lot of people were into at the time, and trying to force other people into at the time and currently as well. Um, the idea that nature is um, manifests in duality. You have male, female, and everything in between. Um, that being reflected in a religious structure was new to me and something that I was really interested in checking out. Um, the more I learned about it, the more I was drawn in, and the more I decided that this was going to be a lifelong path. Um, what surprised me, a lot of things surprised me. I mean, Wicca is a spectrum, similar to other spectrums, but not quite the same. But as a spectrum, you've got all kinds of different people in there, and not everyone fits into the little box of, okay, you've got, Samantha Stevens, or you've got The Craft, or you've got Charmed, or you've got all of this other stuff. It's not like that, and that didn't really surprise me, but that was definitely something to take into consideration when people would ask questions about Wicca, ask questions about what we do, what we are, all of that sort of thing. So, um, looking at popular mythos, looking at things like folks who believe that Wicca itself is an ancient religion, and dealing with the mythology surrounding that. Those are things that I was kind of surprised by.
Right. And you make a good point. Like Wiccan became fairly popular term, especially in the last, let's say, 20 to 30 years. And I'm genuinely curious. When you tell someone who you met for the first time that you're Wiccan, what's the single most common reaction or assumption you get? And what would you wish they asked instead?
Oh my goodness. There's a lot to unpack there. First, generally, I don't go around telling people I'm Wiccan. It's not a secret. It's not private per se, but it is kind of it's something where, for example, in polite company, you're always told that you should not be discussing politics or religion. And, there's a good reason for that. So you've got to know me pretty well in order for me to come out and say, hey, guess what? I'm Wiccan. Once that comes out, there are a lot of different possibilities that I'm going to hear from that. One, do you live in Salem? No. um, do you fill in the blank? read tarot cards, practice herbalism, turn people into newts, all of the things that people associate with media-driven Wicca. Do you wear a pointy hat? Do you always wear black? Well, not always. Those types of things. How do you practice? And sometimes the super rude questions like, do you do animal sacrifices, why do you hate Christianity? And that stuff is just um, it's not
Yeah.
real.
And I
And
feel I feel you made a good point with your last with what you said last, that do you hate Christianity? 'Cause culture treats witch, Wiccan, pagan, occultist, and Satanist as roughly interchangeable terms. So as someone who's lived through 48 years of this conversation, how would you actually draw lines for someone who is not as familiar as we are with the terminology?
well, it's really difficult because all of this, um, inclusive of all religions, is highly personal and highly, because it's personal and because people's interpretations are different and the way people practice each religion or lack of religion that they're into is different, completely different, and they see things differently and they act on them differently. It's very hard to, first of all, come up with a common ground or even say um, Satanism is X, Wicca is Y, paganism is Z. It's kind of a spectrum. And, to start with the Satanism thing, which we get that thrown at us a lot, to start with that, in order to worship Satan, you have to be a Christian. And that's the kind of thing that people don't really extrapolate from the information given to them. Um, Satan is a Christian construct. If you don't believe in Christianity, you don't believe in Satan, at least in the way that Satan is portrayed in, from the pulpit of many churches, from popular um, belief systems and all of that. So it becomes almost a parody of itself when you're trying to explain we are not Satanists because we don't believe in Christianity. You get some pretty funny looks. And to go beyond that and look at the delineation, if there is any, between Wicca and paganism, I think the most telling difference is that Wicca is a system of duality of deity, whereas paganism may or may not follow that same construct. You can be a pagan if you believe in many gods. Doesn't matter if they're all male, they're all female, they're a mixture of the two, or if you believe that nature is a duality in itself. So I think that's kind of where you would draw the line between those specific things.
Yeah, because Wicca and Satanism do tend to get mixed up together in the
Yeah.
general consensus, and mainly because of the satanic panic that happened in the 80s, mainly in America, but I know it bled out. Partially because of the horned god imagery. So how would
Mm-hmm.
you explain the difference to someone who, in good faith, doesn't see why the pentagram on your altar is different from one they see in a horror movie?
Well, I would try to explain it in the same way that that you see Christian cults on television. I mean, and I'm talking cults, not necessarily the mainstream, but how many horror movies have you seen? Like The Omen, for example. Um, where the Antichrist shows up as a child and starts laying waste to the planet and all of that sort of thing. That to me is a Christian movie. Um, why would one have to explain that that isn't what mainstream Christianity is? Yet a Wiccan would have to explain why the craft isn't mainstream Wicca. That's like kind of a, it starts off in a discriminatory way. So you wind up, while trying to be patient and explain to someone who is asking in good faith, there's also a lot of, guys, you need to open your worldview. There isn't just one true religion, and everybody running around here is doing something different or against that one true religion. It's it's a spectrum. I keep using that word on purpose. It is a spectrum of religious belief, and it really serves to do a little bit of investigation on your own if you're interested in trying to figure out what the differences are and what well the differences between mainstream media and what your religious beliefs are, or what beliefs you want to incorporate. um, it's going to take a little bit of work on your own, but feel free to ask questions of any practitioners, of course. But it helps to come from a basis of at least a little bit of understanding.
So what you're telling us is, if we're nice to you, you're not gonna magically make all of us win the lottery, find our true love, and never get sick again. That's a bit of a bummer, Minion.
I'm sorry.
Because no, the reasoning behind it is a lot of pop culture. Like I'm thinking, Sabrina, The Craft, AH's Coven, Bewitched, kind of frames magic as this supernatural firepower. Someone pisses you off, you look at them, you point your finger, you chant something, they burst into flame, or even worse, they turn into a newt. So how does that compare to what a ritual actually does and actually means in your tradition, for example?
Oh my. Um, First, I guess you have to break things down, even a little more. Um, there is a difference between the religion and the practices of that religion. So, in Wicca, for example, the belief system is, as I've said a few times, the duality of deity, which reflects on the duality of nature, as above, so below, same type of thing. You can be a Wiccan and not practice rituals, witchcraft, or however you want to describe that, or turning people into newts, or rituals for luck or love spells or any of that other stuff. I mean, that isn't necessarily a part of the religion itself. It's a means of practice to bring yourself closer to the duality of deity. The some of the aspects of how one would go about doing that in a ritual setting would be following certain rules. For example, you've probably heard of, a lot of people call it the threefold law. What you put out into the universe energetically will return to you 3 times. Now, personally, I don't think the universe has it's going to be exactly 3 times. Okay, I'm going to take this energy and I'm going to measure it, and then I'm going to spew it back out at you 3 times. Ha ha, watch what you do. I don't think that is necessarily how it works, but I do think that, there is an aspect of what you put out into the universe is what you are going to get back. And from a ritual perspective, um, if you are consistently doing negative things, trying to intervene in stuff and harm other people, that's going to be what you're going to receive in return. Whereas if you're positive, or if you are trying to assist in a positive outcome for something, then if your intentions are pure, then that's what you're going to receive back. Not necessarily the lottery numbers or, this person's going to fall in love with me, because there is this whole consent thing that that is really necessary when
Pesky
we're talking about that.
consent.
Yeah, this little consent thing, you don't want to, mess with people's free will.
So
But
I think HD, my darling hammer bearer, my lead mod, framed it really nicely in chat for us. So Wicca, so I'm just quoting him. So as you frame it, Minion, and you can correct me if I misunderstood, Wicca leans toward decentralized, nature-based, non-harm ethics.
yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. Yes, nature-based, definitely. We believe that the planet itself is a deity in most cases. Non-harm for the most part. Now, of course, you're splitting a lot of hairs when you try to define harm. What is harm? And, you wind up back in the philosophical sense of, would you kill Hitler? Killing is harm. Yes. If you cause harm to prevent harm, is that good? Is that ethical? Those are all questions that each person has to kind of answer for themselves. But yeah, that's kind of the way things are based with us.
I think because we're us, and with the like to kitty.
Yes, someone bothering
you're
me.
not playing into the witch stereotype at all. Like, have your cat casually walking in frame.
Definitely, yes.
But us being us, and me being me, and the historian, and a nerd, I think that we should dive a little bit into the history, building up on my last episode, where I was chatting with the lovely Nikki Hooray about the origins of magic and a lot of stereotypes and a lot of fear and a lot of this. I feel like chatting with you would add the other half of the conversation, because you were kind enough to give me a pretty extensive and well researched write up. And I liked it that it was honest and candid. And we know we both hate the guy, but we can't talk about Wicca without bringing up Gerald Gardner. And in your write-up, you did say something interesting. You said that Gardner stitched Wicca together in the 40s and 50s out of Crowley's work, The Golden Dawn, Freemasonry, Charles Leland's Aradia, and Margaret Murray's now discredited witch cult theory. For a viewer who's been told Wicca is the old religion going back thousands of years, how do you hold that honestly without feeling like it's a deflation?
Well, there are a lot of people that were taken in by Murray's book, and the fact that Murray doubled down even in the face of evidence that it was all bullshit, for want of a better term. Wicca itself is a new religion, and there are a lot of people that feel that a religion should be measured based on its longevity rather than what it offers. And, the fact that Wicca was only started to be practiced more universally after the anti-witchcraft laws in England were repealed. Um, People would look at that and say, "Oh yeah, you just made it up." Well, guess what? Every religion is made up. It, it, it's it's certainly a thing where human beings have tried to explain phenomenon they don't understand in religious terms for aeons. Is that Wicca? No. Wicca is, a combination of the things that you already mentioned, Koga, and other things, spiritism and a bunch of other stuff that was all brought into this pot and mashed up together. Um, Now, where people really get hung up is, for example, British traditional witches will often say, well, my family's been practicing witchcraft for thousands and thousands of years, and therefore you're absolutely wrong. There's a big difference between witchcraft and Wicca. Wicca is a religion that was created in the 40s and 50s. Witchcraft is a practice or a series of practices that people of all religions and no religion have been practicing, yes, sometimes for thousands of years. I always look sideways on folks that are like, "Oh, this was passed down from my great great grandmother, and this is the way to turn people into newts or whatever, or this super potent spell has been has been passed down over the ages." Well, maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. But again, that's practice. That's not the religion. So trying to explain those differences and gently lead people to Hutton's books, where there was actual academic research put into origins of the practices and Wicca and all that sort of thing, gently leading them into that so that they can find out for themselves what they want to believe and what the origins of what they want to believe were, I think is really important.
Yeah, because come to think of it, Margaret Murray's witch cult, the witch cult in Western Europe, which was a very impactful and influential book written in 1921, claimed the witch trials, and we'll get to that because that's the spicy part that everybody has an opinion on, but nobody actually reads the papers for. So in her book, she claimed that the witch trials persecuted a real, organized pagan religion. On top of that, and this is a lesser known fact about her, she wrote the Encyclopedia Britannica entry of witchcraft, which stood unchanged from 1929 all the way to 1968.
Mm-hmm.
So more than almost 40 years, which is maddening for a scientific definition. And why do you think the story is still so seductive, and why do people keep coming back to it? Despite the fact that, as you mentioned, Ronald Hutton, in his book, The Triumph of the Moon, in 1999, so 27 years ago, dismantled the theory in a very well-researched and academic way.
Mm-hmm. Well, for the same reason that Charmed lasted so long as a TV series, for the same reason that Bewitched was so popular, for the same reason that teenage girls watched The Craft and suddenly decided to tattoo pentacles on their foreheads or whatever the heck they were doing this week. You're not a teenage girl, dear. I know. I know. And that's not your forehead. There's a difference. Um, but it's seductive because, again, it's another way to explain things we do not understand. It's a simple way of explaining and casting blame at the same time. It's not my fault. It's the witch next door who, cursed me, and therefore that's why I have bad luck. Um, when you think about that scientifically, it's nonsensical, but it's also a good uh, deflection from taking personal responsibility for your own life. And that's kind of why the witch trials occurred, but also um, in a more concrete manner, the church at the time would go after unpopular women. They would go after widows and take their land. They would go after midwives who were in the way of male doctors. They would, you know, women were an easy target. Um, they did not have a lot of protection back then, especially if they were single or if they were ugly or if they were too loud or, they were otherwise challenging the patriarchy in any way. Um, they were easy targets. And, the whole let this be a lesson to you all thing um, was definitely a thing then. It still is a thing now. We only go after the witches in different ways.
Yeah, because
Don't
I'm
always.
thinking, and these are some very old and very hard to dismantle myths. I'm thinking about the first, or one of the first whistleblowers, at least in England, in what was then the early modern ages, in 1584. Kentish gentleman by his name Reginald Scott wrote a very interesting book called The Discovery of Witchcraft. And he was trying to convince his neighbors that most accused witches were just poor old women being scapegoated. So nearly 450 years later, do you think the popular understanding of witch has actually moved on, or are we dealing with kind of the same imagery of don't piss off the old lady with lots of cats?
Well, look at what comes out every Halloween. Look at the imagery that comes out every Halloween, Samhain, whatever you want to call it. It's the same image. It's the old woman, green skin, long hook nose half the time. Go figure where that came from. Pointy hat, broom, all the whole 9 yards, terribly ugly, full of warts, and evil. Be afraid of this. Um, it's the same imagery that there was way back in the 1500s. Same thing. Um, we have to ask why that is and why it is continuing even in these more scientific times. Well, they were more scientific until very recently when all kinds of other strange political things started happening. But you wind up with both fear, especially of women, um, fear of women's bodies, fear of, um, the power women have, uh, and the desire to control them. And while I'm focusing on women here, it wasn't all women that, only women that were persecuted uh, under the under the Witchcraft Acts, and it's not all women, only women now that are witches or that are under attack for their um, belief in Wicca and practice of witchcraft, but it largely is witches, women who are accused and are treated this way. I think because of a general fear of women and women's power.
Yeah, and to build up on that a little, because I do like to play devil's advocate sometimes, but I also like to keep things fairly like backed up by genuine history. I hear a lot. I'm, by my own definition, I like to call myself a non-practicing, non-denominational pagan. It saves me a lot of nosy questions. And it confuses a lot of people, and I like causing a little bit of confusion. It keeps people on their toes. But we hear this talk about the burning times. 9 million women killed in a time frame where Europe's whole population was around the 60 million. So 9 million women killed would have had a serious impact.
Yeah.
And the figure circulates widely in pagan spaces, in feminist spirituality. Recent historical backed and archaeologically backed research estimates a figure roughly around 40 to 60,000 executions across several centuries, across a pretty wide area, both in Western Europe and in the Americas, mostly by hanging. And yeah, there is a substantial minority, so around the 20% mark, who are actually men. How do you talk about the witch trials in a way that honors what was real without fear mongering and leaning into the inflated numbers?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of people who a major part of their spirituality and their identity even is wrapped up in the burning times and the 9 million figure. Um, I've heard it a lot from folks going, oh, all of these, millions of women were killed and all of that. And um, as you say, the numbers and the actual um, research into what happened just doesn't bear that out. Um, the trying to explain that and talk about it, and all the memes, where descendants of the witches you couldn't burn, and those sorts of memes that you hear all the time, um, just don't reflect reality. And it's really difficult to dissuade folks of firmly held beliefs like that, just as it's hard to dissuade them from the firmly held belief that Wicca is an ancient religion. It's a thing that they want to believe. It's it's very sad that all of this happened, and if they actually caught a practitioner of magic in these dragnets that, mostly driven by the churches or neighbors that were jealous of whatever, um, then that was completely by accident because most of the people that were killed were totally innocent people that, had nothing to do with Satanism or witchcraft or any of that stuff and were just killed. Um, Sadly, there is still a lot of violence against people that are considered to be practitioners and people that are practitioners. It's not, you know, very widespread, although it has ticked up since 2016 in this country. Uh, it's still not. It's not a huge thing, but it is there.
Yeah, and you mentioned this fact that Wicca is actually modern and fairly like kind of still finding its footing in certain aspects, and was formalized and brought to the world officially in the 50s, though certain accounts say Gardner had been working on various iterations of the main beliefs as far back as the 1930s. I'm thinking here that, for example, Doreen Valiente, who joined Gardner's coven in 1953, immediately recognized big chunks of Crowley in the Book of Shadows and rewrote them. And most
Yes.
modern Wiccans recite her Charge of the Goddess without knowing it's largely her poetry. Does
Yes.
it change anything for you knowing that some of the most ancient feeling Wiccan texts have a named 20th century author?
No, it doesn't. I mean, and one other thing about Gardner, in the 30s, he was a Freemason. So, I mean, you got that wrapped in to Wicca as well. That's kind of where he got some of his degree system and initiation and all of that sort of thing. But it doesn't change. It doesn't change for me because something that's meaningful and something that you want to follow doesn't necessarily have to be old. I mean, it just goes back to the whole old religion, new religion thing. And is there really a difference? And does that make one more valid than another? And the answer to me is absolutely not. There's always something that we can learn based on history, based on what's happening today, based on our own internal growth as humans, that gives you new aspects and new abilities to believe and shape your beliefs in a manner that fits you best. Age doesn't have a lot to do with it. Charge of the Goddess is a beautiful work, and it really doesn't matter when it was written. It's great to me that it was written by a woman, and it's also really it's interesting to me that given that Gardner in the beginning lifted so much directly from Crowley, and Crowley didn't live to see it sort of brought into mainstream Wicca, people hated Crowley. I mean, people thought he was the Antichrist, thought that he was the devil incarnate.
He played into it.
He, of course, played into it, absolutely. And he was a misogynist pig, so you've got that on top of everything. Taking that body of work, bringing it in to the Book of Shadow, the original Book of Shadows from Gardner, I'm glad it was changed. And it's been changed ever since it was created, and not only by the Gardnerians, but by all kinds of other folks that came along afterwards and started other traditions and created other belief systems from the core, which is duality of deity. Does that make it any less valid than what Gardner originally wrote, which is essentially following Crowley? Or has it morphed and become more meaningful to people as they included more contemporary aspects?
Crowley himself draw heavy inspiration from a lot of Victorian translations of ancient works, which are not exactly the most accurate. A very heavy influence from the Order of the Golden Dawn, which he almost tried to take over at one point.
He tried.
Say. And of course, a lot of influence from Freemasonry, to a point in which I'd be wild and crazy enough to say that whatever the pagan part of Freemasonry kind of morphed into the Golden Dawn, and the not so pagan, the more Abrahamic version of Freemasonry kind of bled into the Mormon Church, with a lot of the structures from Freemasonry, with a lot of the initiation rites, the secret handshakes,
Mm-hmm.
the cool old boys club. And I'm using this term very, very specifically because it tends to be old men. Not necessarily, mostly white as well, but predominantly old men that are directed by the universe, by a great God, by God himself, to be very, very interested in younger ladies. Um, and just, or we could just be honest, freaking adults and call them out for being deeply misogynistic with a very hefty cupful of creepy.
Oh yes, and that's what Gardner brought in the beginning. I mean, the whole idea you must be nude in order to properly perform a ritual. Why? First of all, you get cold. Second of all, running around with no clothes too close to fire, very, very scary. But on top of that, what's the point? I never saw a point there. And the other thing that really set off a lot of people was Gardner's idea that the high priest could always depose the high priestess if she became too ugly or too old to continue her function. Um, well, gee, saying that she could no longer be reflective of the goddess if she was old. Like, excuse me, how many goddesses do we have in pantheons all over the place that are not 20 years old or younger? Not depicted that way anyway. It is quite interesting, the changes that have taken place in Wicca over the years.
Building up on this, on the theme, and this is more of a personal interest, so I'm gonna go off on a tangent here. Because I said I wrote 20 questions. I have like 60 more in my head, and I will sneak them in, time allowing.
Oh, what time is it? I think I have to go. Bye.
You did mention this, like the emphasis that Gardner put on the high priestess being young, attractive, assuming fertile somewhere in there. There's this different imagery of, I've seen it written in a couple of different ways: the three-faced goddess, the threefold goddess, the whole trinity of maiden, mother, crone.
Mm-hmm.
How influential is that sort of narrative and imagery in Wicca actually, and how much of it is witch talk? TOK.
Well, it depends, and I'm going to say that a lot. It depends on the practitioners. It depends on the tradition. It depends on how progressive and wanting to embrace change the practitioners are. There's a movement, and there's been a very strong movement saying that maiden, mother, and crone revolves around a woman's fertility and around her sexuality as not defined by herself, as defined by the outside, a definition that's imposed on women. For example, maiden is supposedly someone who hasn't had sex. Does sex have the act of intercourse change a person? And if it does, why does it only change women? And doesn't seem to change men at all. They have a different triple aspect if you're looking on the Christian side. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether they've fathered children or whether they've had intercourse. So the construct of maiden mother crone can in itself be looked at as a misogynistic construct, depending on how you want to look at it. There are different aspects of belief that the threefold goddess has nothing to do with the maiden mother crone aspect or a woman's relationship with childbirth. And instead, it's um, a kind of series of steps that occur in a woman's life, um, or other methods of becoming, the triple goddess. So you kind of have to look at a lot of this stuff and deconstruct it to determine whether or not that's something that you want to follow. Personally, I had a pretty traditional. I had a child. I've been through menopause. I know, guys. I don't look it, but you don't have to tell me that. So yes, you do change through all of those aspects, but you change through a lot of other ways as well. You don't necessarily have to birth a kid in order to age and gain wisdom from other aspects besides raising a child. And not all women go through menopause at the same time. So you've got a lot of variation.
It's interesting, and now that you like broken this down for us, I'm remembering some of my university classes where we were talking about like the threefold aspect of Indo-European religions, which are fairly male-centric with a few exceptions here and there. If we take Slavic paganism or a couple of the Nordic traditions, for example. But I'm thinking that, okay, we would have, not we, me and you, we, a philosophical we here, we would have these three aspects of a woman in her various stages of life and fertility, okay, because the maiden is pure, assuming she never had her first period, she is unable to conceive. The mother is the embodiment of fertility, and the crone is a woman past her prime and probably past her menopause, so unable to conceive anymore. Whereas these aren't my opinions. This is general literature. Just to preface that. And then I think of what Jean Dumézil in his various works named the functional triad. So every pantheon of the Indo-Europeans has a god, like their main trinity, this is pre-Christian, has a god one god for each of the three vital aspects. Have a war god, you have a more kingly, priestly, good with words god. And then you've got the god who's the guy that actually brings in the money. This whole functional, the functional triad, that's how it's called as a concept, kind of bled into the medieval triplicate social norms of having the oratores. So the orators, the speakers, the wise men, the bellatores, the warmongers, the fighters, and the laboratores, aka the grunts, the people doing the handiwork. So it's very interesting that the view upon women has to do with fertility and motherhood, and the view of men just doesn't change. Like if you're a warrior, you are born a warrior, you are raised a warrior, you die hopefully on the battlefield as a warrior. If you are one of the oratores, one of the scholars, you are born a scholar, you're educated, you live a very, very ideally long and fruitful life, absorbing and sharing your knowledge. And if you're a worker, you work your hands to the bone, and when you're too old to work, you are useless and therefore better off dead. It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting difference, and I'm thinking of various gods and goddesses from various pantheons, especially the Indo-European ones, because if we go into Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa, then things tend to be a little more muddled. But it's very interesting, especially as someone who has studied for a brief period of time male practitioners specifically, because if we're taking the Christian perspective, who are the first two magic users that come to mind, which are valid across all Abrahamic religions? Also, I just realized we're going into ads, so if you'd like a little break now, Minion, let me know. If not, we could just carry on.
A short break might be nice. Just
Okay,
couple
take 5.
Yeah, let's take 5. And
Okay.
chat, if you'd like to ask any further questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will actually have a chance to look at them during the break. Yay, go figure.
Okay, I will see you guys in about 5 minutes.
Yep, be right back. You can watch my chair.
Well, I hope you guys had some fun and got the chance to stretch your drinks and refill your legs and do all kinds of interesting stuff. We are back with our lovely friend, the minion of Discord, talking about magic and Wicca and paganism in general. So we kind of left off talking a little bit about how how people perceive Wicca and paganism and witchcraft versus what it actually is. And starting from the like baseline and like grassroots thing that people see, and then getting into the more philosophical stuff. You did mention something about like running around naked, and the skyclad question always comes up. Ritual nudity in a lot of traditions, both in Europe, in the Americas, and all across the world. Without getting into anything too graphic, what's the actual idea behind it, and how much of the naked witches dancing under the moonlight image is romantic folklore versus anything actually practiced?
Well, I am not a Gardnerian Wiccan, so we'll just start there. Therefore, I'm not really privy to a lot of their practices and how they do things. But I know they did practice at least their main rituals, skyclad, and that's a choice that I would not presume to tell people what they need to do. Now, it's always very important to find out whether your particular tradition is going to perform a ritual skyclad or not, because mix and match is generally not a very good thing when you're trying to work through this stuff. I mean, just saying, it makes a logistical nightmare, and there you go. Um, there is a lot of folklore, and there has always been. I mean, when you look at the Hammer of Witches and the Inquisition, just about everything is the horror and the shock of women unclothed, and that, oh my goodness, if you want to cause a pastor in the olden days to have a heart attack and keel over, well, naked women are just right up there with what's going to cause them to just fall right over. It's a shock and awe thing for a lot of folks. And as with a lot of practices of the time that were labeled scandalous or frightening or whatever, um, as time progressed, a lot of folks wanted to reclaim those titles, like reclaim the title of witch, reclaim the practice of ritual nudity, reclaim um, herbalism, reclaim tarot cards, reclaim a lot of things that were forbidden back in the day. So and yes, Aaron, I was not aware you were a pastor. You may come back at any point. So that kind of thing, I'm not going to say that it was done for the shock value, because I don't know what was in Gardner's head when he decided to do this. He may have just been a dirty old man who wanted to see naked bodies. I don't know. Although he was friends with Crowley, so you can kind of, yeah, I won't say that, or maybe I will, but not right now. It, it's a thing that my tradition never did. We did not ever do that. Now, if solitaries within our tradition want to worship in that manner, have at it, have a good time. But it's not something that we embraced as a collective activity.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
like being skyclad, like a lot of practices, herbalism, like candle work, tarot, which you mentioned earlier, astrology. These kind of get like mixed up and lumped together as witchy. They have very
Hmm.
different histories: folk medicine, various Christian devotional practices, Hellenistic astronomy, and so on. Which of these are actually load bearing, especially in your tradition? And which of these are just like aesthetic add ons that pop culture just like bolted on and just like threw an umbrella term over?
When you're looking at the religion itself, um, they're all bolt-ons. There is no thou must perform these things in order to properly be a Wiccan. That's the one thing about my tradition, especially um, universal eclectic Wicca, which is essentially all y'all do what you want as long as the intention is pure and you follow the the 5 points of Wiccan belief as we state them, et cetera, et cetera. So anything that you do to further your religious experience can be considered part of your practice and therefore part of Wicca itself, so long as you don't attempt to mandate that for everyone. For example, tarot reading. Some people are very, very good at that. It's a plus for them. They use it in a way to further their spirituality. Fantastic. Wonderful. Um, it's a thing that I do. I'm quite good at it. There is mediumship. Some people will attempt to channel things and spirits and people and all of that stuff. Some people are very good at it. Some people use it as part of their religious practice. It's not mandatory. Not everyone's good at it. Um, same with herbalism. Same with any of these things that are associated, whether factually or not. Crystals, chakras, Kabbalah, all of those things. Yes, I know Kabbalah is Jewish. However, there are a lot of practitioners in Wicca that have adapted it or adopted it into their practice. Um, it's it's basically um, all about intention. If your intent is, and I'm not going to say pure because that's such a loaded term, but if your intent is benevolent, shall we say, then your practice can be incorporated into your religious worship.
It's interesting because there are aspects of practice which are still, or I think, a little more common across not only the various flavors of Wicca, as well as other types of pagan worship. Hollywood does like to fear use a lot of fear mongering because the Ouija board, the seance table, the summoning circle, usually framed as opening doors that you cannot possibly close.
Ooh.
Yeah, and this image, where does this imagery come from? And what does it have to do or not do at all specifically with Wicca?
Well, um, that's kind of a tough one. I can speculate. The whole thing with summoning demons and seances and things like that. That was far before Wicca ever, appeared on the scene. You had the Spiritism movements of the late 1800s up until sometime around 1930, where it was extremely popular. It's still popular today in certain circles and in different aspects of stuff. But you also have the this is dangerous aspect that is attractive to a lot of people. Oh, good, it's dangerous. I will, pick up the phone and call, Lucifer into my summoning circle, and we'll all knit a scarf together, or whatever the hell folks are gonna do there. But oh, he might break out, and suddenly we're all doomed. Um, some folks get off on the danger. I mean, take a look at drag racing and crazy stuff that people do that, you know, you get this great adrenaline rush. You also might be dead, but you got this great adrenaline rush. Yay. They're attracted to that sort of thing. And on the other hand, you've got the established powers that be, religious or otherwise, that are telling you, thou shalt not do these things because, these will stray you from the path to righteousness and all that sort of thing. Uh, so, you know, both of those aspects attract people. Now, are these Wiccan practices? No, not necessarily. Can they be used in Wicca as part of your personal spiritual growth? Absolutely. Have at it. Have a good time. And, I would like one of those scarves when you bring Lucifer down into your summoning circle. It could be really cool. Like a
There
Time
is
Lord
this-
scarf. Cool.
Just like wrap it around. Love
That'd be great.
Lucy.
Yeah.
There is a good amount of attraction in the forbidden, dangerous, and the scary, and the occult. Occult etymologically means hidden. It's nothing scary. It simply means hidden. Mystical. The modern Greek word for secret is mystikos. So it's not necessarily something scary. It's just something that a lot of spiteful people didn't have access to, and kind of just like speculated to a point in which speculation turned into legitimately going out and killing people for it.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah, probably. And so we're talking a little bit about hexes, curses, love spells, fortune spells. The first things that anyone asks about. And I think these are the points where the Wiccan Read and the Law of Return actually do the real ethical work. How do you handle requests from curious people who want you to do something to someone, or just to prove your powers and, like some people say back home, do a magic for them?
Oh, definitely, yes. That happens a lot, especially if people have been imbibing in certain liquid substances. Like, oh yes, I need you to do a love spell for me, or this guy at work is really pissing me off. What should I do? I will not bless your Wi-Fi router. I'm sorry. Your dark energy is part of your aspect there, HDD. You're just gonna have to deal with that. But yes, that does come up occasionally. And let's start with love spells, because you see those on the internet all the time. Oh yes, I need a love spell because I'm just a teenage dirtbag, and she's got 2 tickets to Iron Maiden, or whatever the hell's going on there. There's consent. Is attempting to override another person's free will ethical or not? Not. Pretty clear there, not. Since love spells are meant to do just that. I ain't going to do that kind of stuff. No, thank you very much. Consent's a very important thing to me, on a number of levels. However, you can ask a practitioner who's into that sort of thing to perhaps do something like open the pathway such that if that other person is interested in you, then you can facilitate that interaction rather than attempting to override their free will or their consent. There's nothing wrong with that. There's also nothing wrong with, rather than cursing someone, there is nothing wrong with going to your, one of your matron or patron deities and saying, hey, this thing's going on. If you see it the way I do and decide to meet justice in that direction, I'm all for that. Thank you. Here's some here's some nice offerings. Go for it. Great idea. You can usually attempt to phrase things and request what you're looking for in a way that doesn't bring a whole ton of negativity down upon your head or backfire. There are a lot of people who are like, oh, yeah, I tried to curse this guy and then my house burned down. Well, you're kind of putting a lot of negativity out there in the world, and you have to put out your candles when you're done with the ritual. It's kind of important. So occasionally those things will blow right back on you.
Interesting. And it's kind of, like I said, you popularize, because I'm thinking here at your own experience. So you started practicing, and you practiced through the era of mailed newsletters, then Scott Cunningham's 1988 Solitary Practitioner opening the door to anyone to practice, then Catherine McMorgan releasing All One Wicca freely online in 1997, and now Reddit threads and witch talk. What's been gained and what's been lost as this path moved from initiatory, word of mouth secret to open access across the internet?
Well, it's kind of difficult for me to say what's been lost because, I didn't come into it until 77 when things weren't, I'm not going to say they're open. We're open then. I mean, we did not have the internet then. The internet existed, but as the ARPANET in tiny little form, but we can talk about that at some other point. There wasn't a lot of, you didn't put a sign in your front yard, Wicca here, see you Tuesday night, bring your own bring your own frog or whatever you're doing there. I can't really point to what's been lost, except making a thing open to the masses brings with it the masses, which can both be good and bad, depending. It has brought with it a lot of, I will call them fluffy bunnies, who come hopping into your coven or your space or whatever with these preconceived notions, such as we can do love spells, we can do curses. I've collected all these weeds in my front yard. Let's make a potion. All that kind of stuff that they've seen on TV. And it does take time and effort to dissuade folks of some of the stereotypical stuff that we've mentioned before, and the whole idea of Wicca's an ancient religion, and my grandmother turned half the town into newts, and therefore I'm waiting for my powers now. Just hit me on the head with your magic wand, and poof, I'm ready to go, fly on my broom somewhere.
No
a lot of that
hat?
aspect. Say what?
No sorting hat?
Well, I got one over there. I mean, where do you want to be sorted to? No sorting hat today. No. It can sometimes get interesting, but you also bring in thoughtful people. And my tradition is one of academia for the most part. it's not, there are a lot of traditions out there that are, I call them insta witch, just add water, poof, suddenly you're ordained and can go running around, marrying people and all this other stuff. Um, we're very academic, and sometimes you will get people that are interested in that, people that are interested in furthering the practice and furthering the religious aspects themselves and willing to put in the work to do that, which you wouldn't have found if you were, you know, hiding in the woods and didn't have a sign up saying, "Hey, everyone welcome here." It's it's quite interesting to try to weigh the pluses and minuses.
Do love, and for most of the people who've been familiar with your turns of phrase, I do remember you ranting about fluffy bunnies a lot. The truth is, witch talk, I hate the term, but that's the term. And this whole manifestation culture introduced millions of people, predominantly teenagers, to witchcraft aesthetics, crystals, moon water, shadow work, sometimes mixed with prosperity, gospel style, motivational speaking. Oh, focus and the universe will get you a brand new Tesla. From inside the tradition, how do you tell genuine spiritual exploration from algorithm fed performance and fluffy bunny mindset?
The intention. It all comes down to the intention. Um, is your intention to is your intention personal gain? And you hear that a lot in some of the more modern stereotypical stuff, like Charmed, for example. And I watched that show. I loved that show. I thought it was just absolutely fantastic. Was it real? No. Did they get Wicca right? Not really. Was it entertaining? Yep, sure was. But one of the things that they did get right, to an extent, is the whole idea of doing things for personal gain versus doing things for spiritual improvement, improving the environment, improving, I see you're thinking of a question there, so I'm getting a little nervous. But, if the intention is a new Tesla, you're not going to do well in my religion, in my tradition. You might find another tradition that might welcome that, but not mine. Not mine.
I was smirking because I'm reading chat and we're getting some interesting questions. And Aaron asks, where's the line between human intention and divine expression? Or more simply, how do you know when a deity is involved in the active process? It's a very deep question.
You don't. You absolutely don't. You know what you think and feel inside. Now, I've had some quite interesting and quite moving things happen to me that I attribute to divinity. And those are very personal things that I only know by feel versus, is it a scientific thing? Did I do it myself? Was it, I'm very skeptical. And that kind of sounds goofy coming from someone sitting here talking about being a witch, but I am extremely skeptical. You gotta, when you come to me and say, this thing happened to me, I believe that you interpret it in that way. I can't tell you whether, oh yes, that was Hecate, or oh yes, that was, this other thing happening, this other supernatural thing happening, because I don't know. I don't know. I only know my own personal feeling that I probably can't explain to you as to why I think it was outside of myself rather than inside. So you don't know. Where do you draw the line? You don't. You can't. You only know what you know, and and that's as far as that goes. But that was a very good question.
And another question, which is more from the skeptical side, knowing my good friend HDD. Is there a tradition like the TV evangelical gospel type? And I genuinely don't know any sides of Wicca that like actively go and yell at people on the streets. Oh, join our faith, for we are the one true path to enlightenment. But
Oh my God, I hope not. It everything I know about Wicca and my religious path and every religious path that I've seen in Wicca does not proselytize at all. We don't. In fact, my tradition has a massively complex screening process. It's not a everybody show up, great, give me 1995 and suddenly, you are now ordained and off you go. You know, blessed be the fruit, run along there, or any of that stuff, right? Um, it's not a thing that we go out recruiting for. And, if you want to find it, it's often said that, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I believe that. I think that is absolutely true. We don't go after, we're like a number of religions that do not proselytize. And if you want to be one of us, great. There are hoops that you're going to have to jump through. Sorry, it's the way it is.
yeah, because in preparation of this conversation we're having now, I did read up. I have to admit, Wicca isn't the one of the practices I was very familiar with. I am aware of it. I've have some passing familiarity with the Gardnerians and the Hellenistic, but your tradition specifically, universal eclectic Wicca, I wasn't aware of. And I did do some reading, and one thing that's like hit me, really hit me, from some of the documentation you were kind enough to share with me, the UEW's affirmation of acknowledgement explicitly forbids proselytizing and asking members to forgive other faiths and wipe the slate clean. That's a pretty striking commitment in the year 2026. But how does that play out in your real life, at work, in family, with other religious people you encounter?
In what way? In engaging with them?
In showing, like, how should I phrase this? In showing both restraint in which to not hold anyone accountable for their own beliefs, but also standing your ground when it comes to defending your own. I think that would be the best way of phrasing it. I wrote some of these at 2 a.m, so that was a different co-guide than the one you're talking to now.
Good morning. I'm still trying to think of concrete examples, and generally, I don't find myself in a situation where I have to defend my religion, except occasionally. And oh, that was the cat hopping into a box and causing a lot of difficulty being a cat. Go figure. As a Wiccan, I find myself having to almost continually, especially in today's environment in the United States, try to, you know, keep putting bricks in that wall of separation between church and state. That is a kind of thing where I'm not blaming Christianity for this, because what's going on is not an aspect of any of the Christianity that I've read or am acquainted with. But it is an aspect of attempting to draw a line or build a moat between a certain brand of belief system and the rest of the world. Wicca being a part of that. We make an easy target because, as you mentioned, Wicca is constantly conflated with Satanism, constantly conflated with being anti-Christian, constantly being conflated with reactionary type attack vectors on the dominant belief system in this country. And that can be fought while maintaining the prohibition against attacking other religions. Because I think that what's happening here is not, and what we're doing to push back is not an attack on the religion. It's an attack on imposing that religion on others, but not on the religion itself. Because we firmly believe, we being, the folks that I know and the folks that I'm aware of, firmly believe that what you believe and how you handle your life is not a problem for us unless you're actively trying to stop me from doing the same. So, yeah, there's a lot of murk there. There are a lot of difficult times, but going back to the text and doing your best with intention, I think does a lot for making sure that you're not
and
being an
this is
asshole.
A personal curiosity, because what you mentioned reminds me and kind of reflects on a little on my experience. So with me growing up in Romania, spending the first 25 years of my life there are two attitudes I encountered, and I'm curious if this is a bit of a East versus West debate, so Eastern Europe versus America. There's two aspects. So one is the very official state level, where, for example, if they do census work, when they just go through to see populations, and you can fill in the form, and one of the sections in that form is faith. So you could be, according to the last census in Romania, I think happened in 2018, but correct me if I'm wrong. So you could be Christian, any one of the most popular, like I think it's 20 or 25 denominations of Christianity recognized by the Romanian state. Then you've got like 3 or 4 types of Jewish, 3 or 4 types of Muslim, atheist, and others.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting when you end up with 8% of the population being and others.
Mm-hmm.
And the other reaction, especially from people past a certain age, so past their 50s, let's say, if you tell them, oh, I'm interested in our pre-Christian traditions, our pre-Christian practices, Eastern Europe, the Balkans, Romania specifically, have this very rich pre-Christian tradition of various little charms, so to speak, touching with saying a little blessing, wearing a little piece of red string around your wrist, especially if you're a child or a young woman, to ward off the evil eye. And like they either pass them through a Christian lens or just brush them off as we've always done it like this. They don't see the reasoning past this. And if you actively engage with these practices, if you actually want to find the deep and dig deeper into them, you just get the same reaction as most of us old people get when we start wearing band t-shirts. Like, you'll grow out of it, it's a phase, it's fine, you'll grow out of it. And I'm really curious, does this resonate with your own experiences in any way, shape, or form?
Of course. Of course. Are you kidding? I mean, I'm still told that Wicca's a phase and I'll grow out of it. Really? When? But you hear that a lot with a lot of um, aspects of folks that are other. You know, the LGBTQ crowd can tell you in a heartbeat that they're always told it's a phase. Um, you know, you'll be normal soon. You'll fall into the normal um, binary male female thing, and you'll do the right thing and run off and have babies. Child-free women hear this all the time. It's just a phase. You'll grow out of it. You'll want children. Anything that's outside of the norm, however that happens to be defined by your particular environment, is often passed off because the person doing the passing off has no context in which to understand what's happening. And therefore, because they don't understand it, it must not be real. Therefore, you're going to grow out of it. You hear it all the time. Doesn't really, limit itself to non-mainstream religion. It's everywhere. Anywhere that there are people who are other, and it's really interesting that so many of these census questions and so many of these other questions that people are asked all the time is sort of distilled into other, and you are then othered and must function from that lens, and it's sometimes very detrimental.
And did you? I'm asking this question in being fully aware where this is gonna lead, but our audience doesn't know this.
Uh-oh.
How, you know what I'm going? You'll probably know the moment I ask this question where I'm going with this. But how did being a Wiccan practitioner influence your relationship with authorities and having Wicca actually recognize, no, this is our religion, it's equally valid as Christianity, as Judaism, as any other religion, it's not a phase, we're not 10 women gathering on a Sunday night putting curses on our exes?
We're not? Oh, sorry.
I mean, I'm not.
Sorry. I never had a good relationship with the authority, put it that way. Even before becoming a Wiccan at an early age. Mostly because as I was in the othered category, from birth, I was labeled other, in various aspects of my life. Therefore, this whole idea of authority, I never felt included me. And, I'm sure I'm not alone in this. There are a lot of folks on various, that word again, spectrums, that don't feel their um, aspects of themselves are reflected in whatever is called authority. So becoming Wiccan wasn't a reaction to that, because I can imagine that would be a question, but it was more a reaction to what I was being taught in a family of Christians and being forced to go to church when I was young. That didn't last very long because I asked questions that were very uncomfortable, and the church kind of didn't want me around, which was fine by me, but very embarrassing for my family, I must say. But that, you know, learning about Wicca and learning about the duality of deity rather than the authoritarian approach to deity as a function of a patriarchal structure was kind of where I went with that. So hopefully that answers the question.
No, I was more leaning towards certain type of tombstone when I said that.
Oh, that. Oh, that. All right. Well, let's get into that. Um, um, I don't know how many folks know about the military headstone project and the way that the Department of Veterans Affairs in the United States deems a symbol of belief to be acceptable to put on the tombstone of a veteran or an active military person who has died in service to their country when they're buried in a military cemetery. You cannot pick whatever you want to go on those tombstones. You have to select from an approved list. Now, getting into the whole separation of church and state that this country was founded upon, that in itself is a bit of a problem, because why should the government approve a system, a symbol of belief for whatever religion you choose to have? My mom was a Republican legislator, and you would think that and she was very conservative, you would think that being conservative like that, she would want to limit the symbols. But one of the favorite things that she ever said to me was, if they died for their country, I don't care if they want a horse's ass on their tombstone, they should have it. And, yes, absolutely. The pentacle was prohibited. It was, well, I should say it was not accepted. The pentacle was applied for, um, 10 years prior to any of what happened afterwards. And other symbols of faith were approved, but the application for the pentacle just sat there, gathering dust, and nothing ever happened. So a different group also applied for the pentacle as their symbol of belief. Same thing. Other, emergency Christian denominations were approved, and the application just sat there. Well, we had service members that were Wiccans that were killed. There was one in particular in Afghanistan who was killed. And the family wanted the pentacle, and the Department of Veterans Affairs had not approved it. So 2 federal lawsuits were filed trying to figure out what the heck was going on here. And I filed a Freedom of Information request. asking the Department of Veterans Affairs to provide me with every application for every symbol of belief to be put on tombstones from pre when the first Wiccan application was put in till present day, which then was 2007, I think. So this huge box arrives in my foyer there, and I start going through all this paperwork. And the original application had Wicca on it, and someone at the Department of Veterans Affairs crossed that out and wrote Satanism underneath it. Now, that should not have mattered, because if Satanists want a symbol of belief on their tombstone and they died for their country, why not? But nope, somebody else crossed that out and put witchcraft underneath it. And then it just sat there. Well, that Freedom of Information request was basically the smoking gun, showing that the administration of the time and the Department of Veterans Affairs was picking and choosing what religions it thought were real or valid and which were not. And that was a prohibition of the act that allowed them to maintain the cemeteries in the first place. And therefore, both of the lawsuits were settled, and the pentacle became, poof, now it is accepted. So, yeah. And I see HDD says, isn't it the same story with U.S. military having an official chaplain for Wicca, as they don't officially commission it? I don't think we have one anymore. I think that most of the chaplains have been fired, in this current administration. And I will say something about that, in that, there's at least one lawsuit that's been filed already against the U.S. Department of Agriculture from their director sending an Easter message about the resurrection of Jesus Christ to 100,000 government employees, many of whom did not appreciate this, as it was a clear tearing down of the wall of separation between church and state, and that's an ongoing lawsuit. They are talking about a lawsuit against the Department of Defense. I refuse to call it the Department of War for obvious reasons, having mandatory prayer breakfasts at the Pentagon that are being adjudicated by an extremely misogynist pastor, which is really interesting because women are being invited to this. Hi, show up and be complicit in your subjugation. Sit down right there. So, it's, yeah, if that's an authoritarian, anti-authoritarian issue, well, yeah, it kind of is. And it wouldn't matter to me who the authoritarian was or what religion they were trying to push. It's not right.
Interesting. Because you did mention worship, and we did mention a lot of like male figures and male-led things. And I'm really curious because Wicca, at least to my knowledge, is one of the only modern Western religions where the central the central deity is either female or it's female and a female and male couple in perfect balance. So for a couple of us who grew up in monotheistic religions, what does worship of a goddess actually feel like day to day, and is worship even the right word, knowing that many Wiccans prefer terms like honor or work with or commune with?
That's kind of interesting. The question itself is really kind of interesting because it would be difficult to answer whether you were talking about a female entity or a male entity, in that, how does honoring them on the day-to-day feel like? Um, I can tell you what things we do, but how it feels, let me think here. It Now I'm gonna be showing some of my bias, most likely. It feels more warm and less clinical than, for example, um, any of my, previous, when I was really small, interactions with, um, with mainstream religion. That felt a lot more, dusty, um, cold almost. Whereas dealing with a goddess, the whole thing about, inclusion, and you feel better, for example, if you see someone like you in a position of authority, or in a position of being able to help people, or in a position, um, of being in a profession that you want to aspire to, or things like that. It sends a subliminal message. I think it's the same kind of thing here. When you see, um, divinity that is more reflective of you than reflective of someone else, it brings in a different aspect. It is more welcoming. It's more, warm and fuzzy. Not being fluffy bunny, but warm and fuzzy. Yeah, it feels different. It very much feels different. And I'll go a little further. Interacting with each aspect of divinity, and this is a real, fight in a lot of pagan circles, whether, the different gods and goddesses are aspects of the one or their own thing. My particular brand of paganism and Wicca is they're their own thing. They're not aspects of the one. So whenever I interact with a different aspect, well, a different singular entity, it feels different. It feels a little bit different. The communication is different. The feeling is different. The results are different. It's it's quite the thing, and that's why people have their own matron goddesses and their patron, gods, because um, they feel better dealing with one than another.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And I've heard it phrased in a lot of different ways by a lot of different practitioners, and it seems like goddess honoring or goddess worship, call it however you will, feels a lot different to a lot of people, mainly because it might be a little more personal, maybe because it's a little more, I would go as far as to say maternal. um Now, Minion, um you've survived all of my questions except the last one. What I
Uh-oh.
would suggest would be I ask you the last question, we take another 5-minute break, and then we get questions from chat and from Discord and from Instagram. And once we're done with that, we find a friend to pester in the time honored tradition of co streaming, where we co raid someone we particularly want to annoy in tandem. So, for the last official question to close the podcasty radio showy side of things, and this is a big one.
Uh-oh.
If you could wave your wand and erase one stubborn misconception about Wicca from pop culture tomorrow and replace it with one true thing you wish people genuinely understood, what would it be?
It would be the idea that Wicca is anti any other religion, because it's not. And replace it with, we just want to coexist. Thank you so much. Where it's not a pie. It's not, you know, you cut this size piece for this religion and this size piece for this one, and Wicca comes in and tries to steal it all. No, it's not how it works. We can coexist, and we're not anti your religion.
And with that, I think we finished the official or the most formal side of his Sage's Wiccan Fabrice. Yeah.
Yes. Next. No.
No, I think we could take another 5-minute break, stretch our legs, get some drinks, whichever form they might be, and then we can come back and take some questions from chat, take some questions from social media, wax poetic a little, get things a little more lighthearted, because it's the latter part of the day, at least for us over here on the right side of the pond. So I think we could just loosen our ties and have a little fun. Also, I do have some questions that are genuine interests of mine and genuine curiosities that kind of fall out of the scope of a very podcasty kind of format. So does that sound good?
That sounds peachy keen. It's
Take
time for
another-
wine. What is it? It's 5:00 here. Yes.
It's 10 p.m. here. So it's happy hour somewhere. So let's take another 5-minute break. I will leave my darling travelers with a couple of clips to have a good chuckle during our break, and I will also run ads to get our supreme overlords their due diligence. And I will see you in about 5 minutes.
Be right back. We're
If
back.
I remember to unmute myself, we are indeed back. So, we've gone through the formal questions, we've gone through the serious things, and I've got one question I've been dying to ask you for the past hour, Minion.
Do I need to drink more? I think so.
No, I'll start you off with an easy one. Pentacle or pentagram?
It depends on whether it's got a circle around it.
So the one with a circle around it is a pentacle. One without is a pentagram.
You know, I would have to look that up. It's been so long. But yeah, the UEW one doesn't have a circle around it, so you know, ours is a little stylized. It's actually pretty cute. I thought the pentagram was inverted. Not necessarily, Aaron. The inverted, no, that's not my understanding, and that's not how we go about it, because you know the inverted is actually a symbol of the second degree in Wicca. First degree is point up. Second degree is point down. Third degree is generally point up with a little triangle above it.
So my understanding was that the terms are somewhat interchangeable, and pentagram is more of like the mathematical description of the shape, whereas pentacle usually refers to it used in a religious setting. Or at least that's how I encountered it.
It is often interchanged. I mean, it like a lot of things, meanings are interchanged throughout whatever. We know what you mean most of the time. So, you know, there are a lot more things to worry about, like when you get your powers. I mean, you really gotta put that in the calendar, because it's kind of important there.
Yeah, we do have one question from our friend Silas, and I know you answered him already. So he asks, if a potion tastes delicious, can it be considered potent at all? But I think it bleeds into an interesting question, like ever since you started practicing, or not necessarily, but do you find yourself, or do others around you ask for, I don't know, herbal remedies for like various minor inconveniences, like, oh, I have a headache, what kind of tea should I drink? Or
Oh, yes. I'm a master herbalist, certified with paperwork and all that other fun stuff. So I get asked stuff a lot. The first question I ask back is, have you seen a doctor? Because you know what? Western medicine and actual medicines that are measured appropriately by pharmacists and the such like are generally more potent, they're safer. You know what the side effects are going to be based on studies, et cetera, et cetera. If you have gone to a doctor and the doctor has said, for example, you have seborrheic dermatitis, okay, and there is no cure for that. There are basic creams and things that you can use, but let's say you're allergic to all of those, or let's say you've tried those and they didn't work. And you come to an herbalist and you tell them, I went to a doctor. We tried this, it didn't work. We tried this, it didn't work. We tried this, I'm allergic to it. Can you do something for me? Well, yes, we can try various remedies. But it's not something where if someone were to come to me and I have cancer, I don't want to do chemotherapy, I want you to make me a potion or whatever for this. I'm like, absolutely not. Because I have no idea whether what I'm giving you is going to kill you or not. Because I don't know the mechanism of your cancer. I am not a doctor. I can put little things together for various remedies, like for a headache, I don't want to take aspirin. Okay, great. I have this tincture of white willow bark. You can certainly try that. Will it taste good? Likely not. But, you can take a few drops, you can see whether that works. Whether that works for you. But if you come into me and say, I've got a raging headache from hell, I've got a migraine, I can't see things, like you need a doctor. My white willow bark ain't gonna help you. So, there's a time and place for everything. There are some things that work just as well, if not better, than pharmaceuticals, such as dandelion root for high blood pressure, um, aloe vera for burns, things that are natural that work, but there are other things that are just garbage and you're spending your money for nothing, or things that can be actively harmful depending on what other stuff you're taking and what's in your system. So, yeah, herbalism
And
is a thing.
and
You got to be careful.
and yeah, I think HDD asked a good question: is sage Wiccan Febreze or witches Febreze? And by that logic, because I know lots of religions and lots of faiths practice some sort of fumigation, some sort of spreading around smoke to
Purification.
yeah.
Yep.
Usually for purification, but it's used for other purposes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that come from? Like you said, you're a master herbalist. Is burning sage like part of the ritual? Does it have like a spiritual significance? Does it have any like scientific benefits? Like, I don't know, it clears the air of whatever compounds or something. I don't know. I always failed chemistry.
Well, sage is interesting because we kind of stole it from the Native Americans. They would use sage in various rituals that the Native Americans did. Um, Cultural appropriation is a thing, although it's not something that I think is necessarily a good thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many people run around and say that they're, you know, um, they're a shaman, a North American indigenous person shaman when they have absolutely zero blood and they haven't been taught by actual North American indigenous shaman. But for $1,599, you too can become someone who takes peyote and gets really sick. I mean, some of this stuff is
And
crazy.
the first moment my eyebrow starts raising when anybody calls themselves a shaman is like, so you are a Native American spiritual practitioner defining yourself by a term native to the north of Siberia.
Oops. It so much of this is marketing, and that's really freaking sad. But back to sage, um, it is used a lot of times in Wiccan practice in order to purify a room, in order to request various entities that may be existing in said room to vacate the premises, um, and to act as a protective barrier. Whether any of those things are scientific, very doubtful, but we use black salt in the same way. We use, other different things. People will put black salt across the doorway to prevent, um, evil from coming in, whatever one's definition of evil happens to be. Um, we hang a besom across, the threshold, to protect the threshold from from evil intent or evil entities. It's sort of like the evil eye and that sort of thing that other cultures use in order to ward off evil.
Yeah, I'm afraid that the threshold as a space, especially around a house, has libraries worth of literature because every culture has their own thing they hang
Mm-hmm.
from observant Jews hanging a mezuzah to garlic cloves or garlic ropes, sage, mistletoe. Like it's very interesting, and humanity's relationship with plants, uh, both from a medical standpoint as well as like a wording of apotropaic, wording of evil spirits. Yeah, goes. And our lovely HD asks on over on Instagram. And he means well, but the question's worded a little weirdly. So, do you have a preferred brand of broom, or is that a hurtful stereotype? Which leads into two questions. First of all,
Oh
do
dear.
you actually use a broom, or is that like the most widespread stereotypes? Witches have brooms.
I have a bit besom, yes.
And this leads me to something which I've seen in certain pagan circles. So moving over passing over the stereotype of yes, witches need wands, usually some sort of bladed weapon, depending on your choice of media. It could be sword, dagger,
Mm-hmm.
and
Athame.
the athame usually. There's two things that I think would be very interesting about it. First of all, if you wouldn't mind walking us through a couple of these items and what their actual purpose and meaning is. And the second one, which is a little more spiritually meaningful. In your practice, in anybody's practice, is there an aspect or not like an unspoken rule that you should craft at least part of these items yourself, or is store-bought just fine?
Well, to take the first premise, no tool is necessary whatsoever in order to perform a ritual, in order to practice Wicca in any way. None of these tools are necessary. Um, they can make life easier. They can help you to concentrate your energy. Um, if you like them, fantastic. If you don't and you just, want to stand there and say, yo, gods and goddesses, how's it going? Have a great day. You can certainly do that as well. Um, but there are a number of tools that a lot of folks use. And you can make them yourself. You can buy them. You can some people you can buy them from a practicing Wiccan who will bless them for you, infuse them with energy, whatever the heck you want to do there. Um, both the athame and the wand, as it were, can be used for, oh, hey, Achilles, how's it going? Both of those things are used in order to concentrate energy. So you can either use them as a physical manifestation of that energy that you're using to channel, or you can, put them on your altar because they're pretty. I mean, it all depends on what you're trying to do and, the aspects that you're trying to attract or get help from. So that's, it's extremely personal. Um, there are other things that you can use. You can use a ritual chalice. Oh my goodness, 62 months of chaos. Yes. But sorry, I'm a little scattered, but it's all good.
No
You
worries.
can use ritual chalice, where you can put liquids and things that you might want to use in your ritual. Um, Incense burners of different kinds because scent has a lot to do with ritual. A lot of that was carried forward from different ancient ritual practices that morphed into, you have Catholics using the censer in church. You have, the whole story of the frankincense and myrrh thing that was, different types of incense that you would want to burn. It's personal choice whether you choose to do things in a certain manner, um, or, you know, in my case, for example, I'm allergic to all kinds of scents. So if I'm going to use any kind of incense in my practice, it has to be extremely pure and it can't be full of chemicals because otherwise it will just cause me to stand there coughing like an idiot. And that's not a very good way to perform a ritual. So we don't do that. But did you have any questions on specific implements?
Yeah, I think the stereotypical ones. I know the athame and the as a ritual dagger has a lot of significance, and it's probably one of the few religions that has, for lack of a better term, a weapon as an element of ritual. Then, of course, we
Mm-hmm.
have the broom and the wand, which are the feel like the goblet is a lot more. So people expect every religion to have some sort of drinking vessel as part of their ritual. Candles omnipresent in most, at least Western religious practices.
Mm-hmm.
Incense very widely spread across mostly Eastern religious practices in the form of
Mm-hmm.
sticks. So is the athame as presented in a lot of media we've dropped here the soul killing dagger that prevents you from ever coming back?
No. No, and in the wrong hands, you can cut yourself, and suddenly you're doing blood magic when you didn't intend to, and that can be a problem. So, no, no, it's ceremonial only, and some people use it for calling quarters. Some people use it for separating the ritual space from mundane space in order to better focus their energies as they're trying to figure out, what they're doing and how they're doing it. It's it's definitely not, you don't run around cutting people with it, unless you're into something completely different from, trying to do a Wiccan ritual. I don't judge these people. Have a good time, but no, it's not a thing that is necessary. The wand and the athame can be used interchangeably, essentially, for the same types of things. And you can purchase a wand if you want to. You can, I mean, mine is lightning struck wood that, yeah, lightning hit a tree in my backyard. Great. I now have a very long supply of lightning struck wood. It has a different energetic feel to it, and I use that. It's pretty cool.
And except for avoiding traffic, what else is the broom used for?
The broom, um, there is of course the stereotypical riding the broom thing, and enough has been written about that and various ointments that we probably don't want to get into that part. But what it's used for today is basically a barrier. So you would put it above your threshold, and we're back to threshold and crossroads and all of that. Again, Hecate is my matron, so there's going to be a lot of these spaces between that I'm kind of interested in.
We do love the
Um,
liminal.
Pardon?
We do love the liminal.
Yes. So you would put this above the threshold. So, supposedly your evil is not going to get through there. There's also the jumping the broom, which is used in a lot of Wiccan hand fastings. It's, you're jumping the barrier. You are changing your space from two single people to a partnership when you jump the broom. It doesn't have to be a big jump because, people fall on their face and it's very embarrassing. All you need to do is just step over it as a joined couple to then, change your space from mundane space to now partner space.
Interesting, because the only tie between brooms and marriage that I'm aware of comes from Balkan folk belief, which we have this, and I'm certain I speak for a lot of people's grandmothers when I say we had this visceral fear of getting swept across our feet, because especially in certain parts of my country, there was this very deeply ingrained sacrosanct belief that if you got swept over your feet, you'll never get married. Which, of course, in very traditional worldviews was like the ultimate curse. So,
why didn't someone tell me this before my first marriage? Oh, man, that would have been great. Sorry.
So especially my grandmother, my maternal grandmother had like a visceral fear of this. She was less concerned about me sticking a fork in a wall socket than she was about sweeping, like brushing the broom over my feet when I was a kid. Just to give you a frame of reference.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, the broom is also a reference to hearth and home. So, when used in a wedding sense. I mean, not to diminish your trauma at all from this grandma and the foot thing.
I got the vacuum. I'm fine.
Excellent. Me too. But it's a symbol of hearth and home. So when you're jumping the broom, you're also changing your space from single to partner and emphasis on the home.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. And does this tie into carrying your wife across the threshold as well?
I never really looked into that particular ritual. However, it would make sense to me that it seems kind of misogynist to me, obviously. But the whole idea of, a lot of negative imagery is coming to mind, like, throwing the wife into this you're stuck now, babe. Boom. You don't get to cross the threshold of your own accord. I'm freaking taking you in there. I don't like that. I don't like that. When you step across the besom, when you jump the broom, it's two people. It's a hand fasting. So, your hands are tied together and you're stepping together. It's not I'm dragging your ass across this. Ha ha, you're mine now. No, it's a partnership type thing.
Interesting. And you did mention something, and I feel like this would be a great time to clear the air and clarify some things and use some terminology correctly, because I'm a historian. I'm a sucker for correct terminology. We should have done this at the very start if we were properly academic about it, but we'll do it at the very end just for kicks and giggles and as a little reward for people who are patient enough to survive nearly 3 hours of us ranting about obscure stuff.
Thank you, guys.
You did mention calling the corners. We hear it in a lot of media. Witches, before they do anything in any ritualistic manner, thank you, The Craft and all the 90s teen girl movies, What actually is calling the corners? And why is it called that?
It's called calling the quarters. Thank you, Aaron. It's called calling the quarters because you're basically calling the entities that inhabit the four cardinal directions of a compass. So you're addressing the entities of the east, west, north, and south, and the inhabitants thereof, and the elements thereof. Because as we know, the pentacle is a five-pointed star. So, earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. So you're invoking spirit in general. Yes, you know this. But for those who may not, each of these elements is attached to a quarter, a cardinal direction. So when you're calling these things, you're basically saying, yo, fire people, wake up, please. I have a ritual that I'm doing here, and I would like you to attend and assist. Thank you very much. And then, you go to each of the other quarters. So you're calling those quarters and the entities therein to assist you with whatever magical working you're doing.
Nice. I knew basically, like I knew the gist of it, but never phrased in such a concise and concentrated manner. I did try and dabble with Wicca in my teens, but the media about it that bled into Eastern Europe in the 90s is
Oh God, yes. Yeah. I think I was rather lucky starting in the 70s because we didn't have a lot of that. I mean, there wasn't a lot of crazy media stuff that went along with it, and learning it in the UK in the beginning. That was really good. But I do want to mention something else about quarters. Um, a lot of that practice was taken from Golden Dawn and Freemasonry and ceremonial magic, where they would call the watchtowers, and each one of those was called through an archangel. So, that was their practice, and I guess we thought it was a great idea. Hello, Akiza, welcome. It it wasn't throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It was just changing things because Wicca is not a Judeo-Christian based religion. Therefore, we're not going to call archangels, although there are some aspects of Wicca and ceremonial magic that do. And I'm not going to disparage them, but that's not my practice.
yeah, which is interesting now that you mention it. And I might have watched The Craft in the previous week just for references. But it's really interesting because they call the corners, but if you actually watch the scene in which they do it, they mention they start with hail the guardians of the watchtower of the north, and so on and so forth.
As soon as you hear the word watchtower, you know that they're basing this on Judeo-Christianity. They're not basing this on Wicca. Therefore, what I said about not all witches are Wiccans, absolutely so, and not all witches are Wiccans, absolutely so. So, if they're calling the watchtowers, chances are they're combining some aspects of both. And if
Okay.
that's their practice, fantastic. It's not mine.
The other term that gets thrown around and has been thrown around in media because we were deciding to be edgy boys and edgy girls in the 90s and stopped calling it a spell book. What actually is a book of shadows?
Originally, what Gardner created as the main tenets of the Wicca that he created was called the Book of Shadows. So, what modern Wiccans do, at least and I'm premising all of this with my tradition, my practices, what I understand, given that eclectic, go figure. I'm not a British traditional witch. There you go. That annoying book from Charmed. Yes. Oh, I've got a funny story about that. But let's do this first. Um, it is a book in which you would write your rituals, your spells, your recipes, because there are a lot of kitchen witches out there. They're going to make something really good and really yummy and infuse intent into it. Happens. Um, all of that gets put into the Book of Shadows, and you know, I've got one. A lot of Wiccans have them, and it is somewhat close to the annoying book from Charmed. Only nobody is going to be drawing pictures of various demons that we're going to vanquish, because that's kind of, again, mixing Judeo-Christianity with Wicca and the demons. No, we don't do that shit. So you know the funny story is that I'm also a Discordian, which means that I love to throw chaos into everything. So
Really, the
I
minion of
was,
Discord likes to throw around chaos.
yeah, there you
Shocker.
go. It's kind of scary. Um, so I was asked to lead a ritual from a Discordian lens, which was really hilarious. Um, One of the things in Discord and the works of Robert Anton Wilson, who's a fantastic philosopher, but just so you know, in the Illuminatus trilogy, there's a thing called the sacred cow. And the sacred cow is a symbol that has, yes, chaos, a symbol that has the golden apple with the K on it up here, and infinity or some other symbol down here. And that is the sacred cow. So I come out in a cow suit with the charmed Book of Shadows, saying that we're going to invoke this demon from the charmed Book of Shadows. And people are like, "Oh my God, what is she doing?" Yeah, and there was much rejoicing and waving around of athames and things like that. It was very interesting. The best part is I was never asked to lead a ritual in a Discordian manner again. Win.
Fair enough. And our
Did you
good
do it in all moves? No.
our good friend Tara, who I know is a fine connoisseur of matters esoteric, asks a very, very good question. Have you dabbled in any of the readings, such as the Lesser Key of Solomon, or like the more ritualistic? Some would call it goetic. So, did you dabble during your research in that side, like the OG magic books that Crowley or the Golden Dawn or any of the spiritual practitioners of the second half of the 19th century kind of drew inspiration from?
I've read them. I've looked at them as part of my learning and spiritual practices. However, um, I attempted to make a clean break between the Abrahamic religions and Wicca, a very clean break, because the premises are so different. The Lesser Key of Solomon, the entire um, Old Testament biblical stories about King Solomon and Moses and those ceremonial magician type things that you see in the Bible. And the interesting part there is that when performed by a man, it's okay. When performed by a woman, oh no, you don't. But okay, taking that out of the equation, the entire overarching story of the Old Testament is that of a God that I would not embrace as someone I would follow. Far too moody, absolutely hormonal. No, thank you. Not my cup of tea. So anything that came out of that is something that I would study for historical purposes and to see where that fit in the ceremonial magic as it developed through the ages and then was borrowed, stolen, whatever, into the creation of Wicca. So looking at it from a historical perspective is one thing. Looking at it as a practitioner is not a thing for me. But I have read a lot of it. I have read and studied Kabbalah a bit. But again, that's not, that's not my path. My path's over here. The folks on this path over here, more power to them. May they find what they're looking for. But no, I'm over here. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because I did a lot of research in ancient and medieval magic to a point in which I didn't touch a lot of the Renaissance movements like the Kabbalists and the Goetic movement, which started in the Renaissance. Everybody just like slaps medieval on everything that happened before the Industrial Revolution, and that's one of my pet peeves. Because the thing you mentioned is interesting, and I would just like to clarify. There is a hefty dose of misogynism in dealing with magic, because if we take, so I want to make a clean break, and this is vital. Let's make a clean break between Old Testament and New Testament. And when I say Old Testament, I'm referring mainly to the 5 books of Moses, which are the Pentateuch, the Torah, the whatever you want to call it, where the only female practitioner isn't shamed because she's a woman. She's shamed because of the specific practice. The Witch of Endor is a necromancer.
Mm-hmm.
But she's old, weird, lives in a cave. But the king himself comes to her. So she is an outcast, but surprisingly useful when you actually need her. And yes, King Solomon, I'm only mildly sorry if I offend anyone in chat, but King Solomon is the Jigga Chad of the Old Testament. He knows everything, does everything, no harm comes to him. He is the alpha male of the Old Testament. Whereas when it comes to at least my research in authentic medieval magic, they don't necessarily make a discrimination between male and female practitioners. For example, Latin, which is the main language in which most of this was written, has gendered nouns, and all the nouns referring to magic are masculine. They're not even neuter, they're masculine. So you have the maleficium or the maleficius, not the maleficia, not the woman the male practitioner of curses, the male practitioner. And then you get into the 1500s and the 1400s, and things start getting messy once we get our friends, the Spanish Inquisition, and we kind of chill out going on crusading and venting all that testosterone out. But it's really interesting to see perspectives like that. This is what attracted me to researching magic. Perspectives. Is there this little tradition trickling down from ancient times? Are there the remote corners of Europe where Christianization never hit? I doubt it. I doubt it. There might be the argument I've seen from in academic circles, in circles of historians and faith historians and anthropologists. Some have argued for it because, especially if we're taking the British Isles, you have a little revivalist pagan movement with the Danes coming in the 11th century and the Dane law, because the Danes were pagans back then. You do have the argument that Wales specifically had so few villages and so far between each other that there might have been remote corners of Wales where this mass Christianization movement, especially during the Heptarchy, 7th, 8th, 9th century, didn't actually bleed into. You have another argument saying that, oh, they just practiced in secret the same way the Jews did in Spain after the Reconquista, after 1492. I'm skeptical about it. I'm not saying it's a hard no. I know from my own lived experience that at least in Eastern Europe, where we never had an inquisition, the Orthodox Church never burned anyone at the stake. Worst case scenario, they branded you with a hot iron. You'd walk it off after a week or two, but they didn't specifically execute anyone. We do have a few witch trials in Transylvania in the late 1700s, but there's like 3 of them. And the poor woman charged for it was fined, and mainly because she liked to fuck around with people and mess up their finances, not because she was doing anything mystical or satanic. So the ultimate charge that it leads to is I'm not super familiar with how the legal terminology would turn, but it's basically public disturbance, some sort of stuff like that. Let me catch up on chat. The Abrahamic religion slant does gender-centric religious practice do a disservice to all of us?
Yeah, I'd like to take on part of that for a sec. In Wicca, there is the Dianic tradition, which is female worship only, and goddess Diana specifically. Now, there's been debate for decades as to whether or not that's truly Wicca, because it's not duality of deity. It's we're only worshiping one. Whether they also believe that a male entity, God, energies, whatever, exist, I don't know. I haven't really looked into the Dianic tradition, but it is a thing. Is it detrimental? Is a really good question, because I lean more towards my matron goddess than I do any of the male entities, because to me, the matron goddess basically said, you, me, let's go. And I have not ever received any type of feeling from any male entity on that side. I obviously believe the male aspect exists, and I also believe that it is a spectrum, again, with it's not a okay, XX here, XY here, and that's where everything is. I don't believe that at all. So trying to segregate the genders and segregate the practices based on perceived gender of the practitioner, I think is a disservice to all of us, because it does limit the perception of the practitioner to a biological binary system when we know in both humans and nature that is not the case. Wicca follows nature. So if the nature of things is a spectrum of gender, then our deities should reflect the same thing. And anyone that has read anything about Greek mythology will agree. And the sun is doing all kinds of weird things to me, so don't mind the weirdness here. I'm not trying to be spooky. Um, the the binary male female just has not existed in antiquity when we're looking at the Greek system and when we're looking at the Roman system. It just was never there. And anything different is a postmodern nailing our desires on gender, or some people's desires on gender, onto a spectrum.
Yeah, because thinking of like the ancient religions, the practices, like if we take Greco-Roman gods, which are the popular ones. No, first of all, the whole idea, and this is the latest trend in studying ancient pre-Christian religions, especially in Europe. First of all, no god was the god of A, and that's it. Like the ancient people didn't think of them as we don't talk about Ares because he's the god of war, and if we talk about him, we invoke war. No, the Ares in the Greek world, and later Mars in the Roman world, was worshipped by a very wide spectrum of people for a really wide number of reasons, to a point in which one of the aspects of Mars, which I loved, is as an agrarian god. And do you know why? Because of his association with war and metal and iron. One of the aspects he was worshipped in the Department of Ares. One of the aspects he was worshipped in, and I think even Cicero mentions this. Can't remember the cognomen he had for this aspect, but he was he who wards off rust. And farmers who were very concerned about their plows and their scythes being rust-free used to give offerings to Mars to keep their farming tools rust-free.
And he makes good candy too, just saying.
To someone who is widely considered as a war god and a bit of a womanizer, though, when you share a pantheon with Zeus.
Yeah, Zeus was a very naughty boy, just gotta say.
I'm from the school of thought that says that 80% of Greek mythology wouldn't have happened if Zeus would have kept it in his pants.
And if Hera hadn't handed it to him on several occasions.
Basically. And how do you...
That whole swan thing, I mean, come on, guys.
Minion, if I may ask, and if I may be bold enough, because we were talking about ancient gods, and especially Greco-Roman gods. I know there are two traditions, I would call them, who focus on worshipping these predominantly Greek gods. I've heard that Greek god worship tends to be a little more popular than Roman god worship, and even the Romans plagiarized half of their pantheon from the Greeks.
And the Egyptians too, but there you go.
Later on, yeah. In the later Republican era, yeah, we tend to agree. Um, have you experienced or noticed any friction between, let's say, Hellenistic pagans and this pagan revival happening in Greeks, the ones that say they are the Dodekatheistes, the worshippers of the 12 Olympians, they are the original Greek religion, which has a
Uh,
political aspect to it, kind of tied to a revival of the Greek Communist Party, but we're not gonna get into that because that's gonna be another 3-hour rant. But have you noticed like people calling each other out, saying, "Oh no, we did it first. We're the actual legit worshippers of Ares or Poseidon or Zeus or so on"?
occasionally, occasionally. Now, there are witch wars. Okay, they're real. They're usually over money or over, you know, land or over something tangible or perceived power. But to me, and this might be extremely controversial, but to me, it's like a bunch of homeowners associations going after people who don't mow their freaking lawn. I mean, you have no real power. You are a bunch of folks that are attempting to um, worship or, create a spiritual practice that answers some of your questions and helps you in your living your lives on this planet. Who was here first only works when you hit that little Primus button when you show up in Koga's stream. But it doesn't matter because same thing, Wicca, late 1940s. Does this mean that it's less valid than something that's 2,000 years old? No, it does not. Same freaking thing. I saw Poseidon first. Hello? What does that do for you? The only time that I think we have a serious problem is when you wind up with the white supremacists who are trying to take over certain aspects of Norse paganism. That's a problem for all of us. That needs to be squished. Seriously squished. And I don't normally stick my nose into other people's practices, but any religion that practices that a certain group of people needs has less rights or needs to be treated in a less beneficial manner to another group for reasons that have nothing to do with their behavior, I got a problem with that. I don't think that should be permitted under the umbrella of Wicca or under the umbrella of paganism. Just, my 2 cents there.
Yeah, I tend to heavily agree with the whole idea of certain extremist groups borrowing from spirituality or trying to find like an esoteric moral standing. It's not new. It's at least 100 years old by now with the Thule Society in 1920s in Germany. Trying to prove that they are the Aryan master race when the Aryans were different people altogether. Or various people saying, "Oh, you are not enough percent this ethnicity or enough percent this background, or you're not we didn't even touch on, I know we touched on this when we were talking, having our preliminary talks. We didn't even touch on the subject of lineage and initiation.
Oh.
The question here would
Iggy.
be, And I'm trying to ask this in the most respectful and neutral way possible, though my own bias is gonna bleed out. If it's for everybody, if it's widely accessible, if I want to become a Wiccan or a pagan or a Christian or a Jew, it's like, yeah, as long as you jump through the hoops, it's fine. Are the hoops too wide?
Are the hoops too wide? It's an interesting question. And, touching on the lineage and all the stuff that goes with that, there are witch wars based on, can you trace your lineage directly to Gardner? That's definitely a controversial aspect in the world of the British traditional witch. My trad's a little bit different there in that we think that self-initiation is equally valid and one should be judged on their behavior rather than on whether they were initiated by an initiate, by an initiate, by an initiate, which always comes back to the who initiated Gardner. I kind of made up this person that nobody has ever been able to prove or disprove existed. Who initiated Gardner? Where did that start? So, is the net too wide? I think we being the Wiccan community, we need to be able to police our own. But when it comes right down to it, we don't have official excommunication. We don't have official shunning of the person. I mean, we have a lot of unofficial shunning of people who exploit vulnerable people. That's a thing where, we'll pass the names around like, don't associate with this person because, they're exploiting vulnerable populations. Shit like that. But it's all within our groups. It's not a public declaration on a neon sign. This person is bad. It's really a good question as to whether in the sense of Wicca as a whole, we need to do more than we're already doing. But within an individual tradition, we know the people we're not going to allow in. We quickly learn if someone that we did allow in is doing untoward things, and remove them from our specific tradition. Can we stop them from practicing Wicca? Of course not. Just like, you can't stop an excommunicated Catholic from saying the rosary. You can't do that. It's just not the way things work out. Making it accessible to a lot of people is good, but people have called my tradition elitist and all of that because we require an entrance essay before you can even start. And the entrance essay is basically, what's the meaning of the Wiccan Rede to you? What do you think about the 5 points of Wiccan belief as we state them? Tell us your thoughts. And if it comes back like, oh, y'all are a bunch of crazy people, well, we're not going to let them in. If their essay is really super bad, we're not going to let them in. If they haven't taken the time to answer the questions, in a meaningful manner, we're not going to let them in. There are gatekeepers to different things, and my tradition may not be for you because of the academic nature of it. So are we elitists? Yeah, we are. Will another Wiccan tradition suit you better if you're not willing to put in the academic amount of work in order to be one of us? Most likely. There are a bunch of other trads out there. You don't have to be with ours. It's difficult, but there are a lot of different Wiccan groups out there.
Yeah, because, and also to build up on this, Minion, from like my own personal research and experiences and beliefs to a certain and this is something that pissed off a lot of the priests I met growing up. We can ignore the whole who initiated you, and then because especially in like Abrahamic religions, it's like God blessed that guy and that guy blessed his friends, and those guys blessed his friends, and so on and so forth, and you got like an assumed uninterrupted line of initiation spawning from insert preferred divinity of choice. But it's also a question of the sharing of knowledge in an organized fashion, because people might argue that going to school is an initiatory practice. Not everybody goes to school. Not everybody sits their SATs or their I don't know, insert any type of exam here. The schooling is an initiatory practice. There are a lot of things that are initiatory practice. Learning a job is an initiatory practice. Learning a language is an initiatory practice to a certain extent. And I'm not just saying that as a non-native English speaker. So my reasoning would be, if the criteria for sharing certain types of knowledge should be not necessarily like airtight, but that the initiation process should be a little more thorough than just, I don't know, like the classical Freemasonry stereotype. You need to be an adult male of good moral standing.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about our initiatory practice. To be initiated into the first degree in our practice, in our basic tradition, you would need to first pass the entrance essay, and then you would need to go through 12 lessons, and they're pretty comprehensive. And you would have to provide written responses. You would have to write your own rituals. You would have to, and this is just first degree here. This is not priesthood. This is first degree. You would have to go through all of those things, all of those lessons, and they would be judged by an elder or, a teacher appointed by an elder or whatever. That's just first degree. Second degree, you've got double the amount of lessons, double the amount of work. Now, to get through the first degree, it generally takes 8 months to a year. Second degree, it generally takes 12 months plus. And then you have a third degree. And that is a year-long project that contributes to the religion as a whole. Once you're done that, and that is judged by the group and the elders, then you would achieve priesthood. Not until then. So when folks are like, oh, you're a bunch of elitists. Yeah, we are. We are.
Yeah, and some might argue that the structure is very Masonic, like in the core Freemasonry of being an apprentice than being I think it's apprentice, journeyman, and master.
Mm-hmm.
But university academia goes through the same steps. You get your bachelor's, you get your master's, and then you get your
Yes.
PhD. And you are ultimately judged by the people who, once you attain the highest degree, will, with some exceptions and some caveats here and there, become your peers.
Yes. And, back to the dissemination of knowledge part, would you really want people who had not been through the process of medical school and residency to be treating you in the emergency room? Don't think so.
I mean, if it's a life or death situation, and there's a slim chance they might actually save my life, I'm willing to squint.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's not the same thing, but knowledge has always been restricted to certain groups, as your previous point happens from grade school on. You're not allowed to see the third grade books when you're in the first grade, unless you've already finished the first grade books and you're somehow in a school that isn't insane, and you wind up with the second grade books and then the third grade books.
Yeah, that's a very US centric view of schooling, because in certain parts of Europe we kind of just like school books are publicly available and you can just buy them. No one's stopping you.
Well, yes, of course. I mean, you can buy them in the US also, but if you're a child going through the school system, you will want those milestones showing that you have mastered this information. And now you've got this information to master. And then, you get the next piece of information. I don't think all that many people, when you throw a pile of books at them or you throw a pile of information at them, will be able to assimilate all of that information in that format. I mean, of course, everybody learns differently, but, you kind of have to go from one to the next in a lot of different things in order to learn the whole thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I'm thinking here academia versus organized religion, and even organized religion might be a strong term for certain types of practice, because you did mention self-initiation, which I think is fairly original for like neo-pagan practices and pagan practices, which is something the big boys don't do. And it's the same with academia. Like, no one's stopping you from trying to learn on your own. I don't know how successful you will be, because you need the system for assimilating that knowledge. But it's also a matter of, especially academia versus religion, there is this side of, you can find very, very advanced academic papers will search away.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You can theoretically find very deep theological treatises from all the faiths out there. Still a Google search away. It's the matter of mixing that with an oral tradition, a certain side of that information, maybe not necessarily the information itself, but keys to interpreting that information. It's the running gag, especially between Bible scholars, that if you read the first line of Genesis in English, you won't understand anything. Okay, in the beginning, God creates in the heavens and the earth. Statement, blanket statement. The further back you go into the translations, the more the plot thickens, because if you go into first step before English, Latin, in principio creavit Deus terram et caelum. That in principio could mean at the beginning, but it also mean in principle. And you get one there. And you go to the Greek, it gets even thicker, and then you go to the original Hebrew, Aramaic, and Bereshit bara Elohim, and then you hit that Elohim, which is a plural and the
Yes,
feminine,
yes, yes.
and that's
Sophia.
the first
Nobody
line.
talks about Sophia. You know,
And that's
they,
the first line, and you start scratching your head. So this is
yes.
I think I speak for a couple of people when I say that religion or like spiritual beliefs do need this, call it a community, I think would be the best term, a joint, not necessarily oral tradition, but like a general communitary consensus regarding certain practice, certain aspects of the practice, certain aspects of the belief, certain aspects that need someone who's been through this to sit you down and talk you through it, because you're not going to get it otherwise.
Well, in Wicca, we absolutely um, encourage and acknowledge the solitary practitioner. So, I mean, Cunningham started with that stuff. Wicca for the solitary practitioner, encouraging folks that were interested in following that particular path to, become solitary practitioners and do their own thing. Um, there are groups of solitaries that get together and talk to each other without a hierarchical structure, without a tradition behind them or anything like that. They are a group of solitaries. And, that to most of us is entirely valid. You don't have to be initiated by an initiate, by an initiate, by an initiate. You can, as mentioned before, self-initiate and be a solo practitioner. Lots of books will help you. Lots of both practical and theological books will ground you in these practices. And a lot of us try to make ourselves available to solitaries who might have questions. And conversely, I always learn a lot from solitaries. I mean, they do things differently than what I would do. They're equally as valid, and sometimes they're pretty damn ingenious because they've been doing this by themselves the whole time. Um, if the quarters are to be called, they don't have 4 people to do that. They're going to do it themselves. All those sorts of things contribute to the practice of Wicca as a whole. So it winds up being not a free-for-all necessarily, but the word eclectic comes back to mind in that we see each of these paths as valid and, don't try to pigeonhole people into you must follow this path. You must write the essay for UEW. You must go through first, second, and third degree. A lot of people are extremely happy with their practice and their individual communications with their deity of choice and their results that they get in doing this, and the feeling of community that they get with that deity as opposed to with a group of humans. It's truly eclectic.
Yeah, but and the question, like this begs the question, like, okay, if solo practice is valid, if self-initiation is valid, how do you know you did it right? Like, for example,
How do you know you did it right?
you did it right, yeah.
You just know. I mean, this is going to sound really stupid, but or clueless, but you kind of know. I mean, do you feel a connection with deity when you do this thing? If yes, continue doing this thing. If no, change the thing you're doing. You know, it, it's it's all personal, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people miss about religion in general. It's personal. Is it serving you, or is it serving a corporate entity somewhere that is expecting 10% of your paycheck? You know,
All
is
powerful, just can't handle money.
absolutely. Oh my God, how did that happen? Oh yeah, please. Um, yeah, pretty much that. Is it serving you? Is it expanding your spiritual practice? Is it helping you to understand the world? If the answer is no, maybe you need to make changes.
Yeah, no.
You know?
My only question is, as a troll myself, and as a person who has both trolled and been trolled in his research across the better part of what is getting close to 20 years now. How does this, or what are the mechanisms to protect solo practitioners from other practitioners pulling rank, for lack of a better word, or going like, oh, you self-initiated, yeah, nah, you didn't do it right, you're
Oh,
supposed to do it like this, and I know
that's a
better because I'm a higher degree and stuff like that.
that's a pish posh thing. I just gotta say, okay. I've been doing this since 1977. Obviously, I am a high priestess. I am a right reverend. I have a doctor of divinity. I got all this shit. Got all of these wonderful little check boxes. All right, which in the end of everything, doesn't mean anything if I don't feel that I'm connected with deity and all that other fun stuff. But I went to Glastonbury. Okay, now for folks who haven't been to Glastonbury, it is kind of like Salem in the US in that it's a really witchy place and lots of witchy people go there to do witchy things. It's also a great place to go shopping. You can get all kinds of cool stuff there. It's really great. Um,
Welcome, Raiders.
I see you got raided. Hello, Raiders. Um, no, you're just an
Yes, thanks
asshole.
for the
Love you,
raid.
Aaron. Um, so I go to Glastonbury and I walk into a shop and they've got all kinds of really cool incense. And I'm like, oh, great. And I'm looking around. Hey, Jessica. So I'm going around and they've all got these little placards, like, this is the incense of Hecate, and this is the incense of Isis, and this is the incense. You can call anything what you want. So I'm going around, sniffing around, sniff, 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 sniff. Okay.
Give me just a
Um,
second, minion, because I'm misclicking stuff, and let me just welcome the Raiders if I'm.
okay. I will stop my rant.
So, thank you so much for the raid, Aki. How was your stream? What are you up to? Talking about witchy stuff and Wicca and paganism. Let me do Dead by Daylight. Ooh, how was that? How was DBD? Wiccan, yes, our lovely minion, wrong side, over here is a practicing Wiccan and has been practicing Wicca since the 70s. And she has been kind enough to share some of her experiences with us and some of her knowledge and some of her jokes. And we've been answering various questions. We won't be on for too long, but judging the fact that both Minion and I tend to be yappers and very firm in our knowledge and belief.
Oh, that's great, D Ducky. Sounds great. Yeah. Hi. Welcome on in. Um, yeah, HDD, you've got a really good point there. They are fried. they are dealing with a bunch of people asking when they're getting their powers, and the power of three will set us free, yay, and whatever the hell is going on there. The point I was going to make there is that I was in this incense shop, minding my own business, looking at things, smelling things, deciding, do I want some of this? Do I want some of that? Picked a few things that I wanted, and they're scooping it out and they're setting it up, and they're like, "So, you Wiccan?" Uh-huh. "Who initiated you?" It's like, oh God, this is the wrong question. This is not the question you asked. And I basically just looked at them and said, "Yeah, I'm eclectic." "Oh, that's not real. Oh, that's not real. No, no, no. You need to join our Wiccan club class, whatever the fuck we're doing down at the pub." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." I took their little business card and I went away thinking, "Really? Yeah, no, I don't need this. But I'll just smile at you, wish you well, and slither on off, because I'm generally not one to start a fight in the middle of somebody else's shop." So I'm wandering around, and off the beaten path there was this other shop. I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna go look in there." So I go look in this other shop, and I'm by myself for this because that's where I feel best, shopping for Wiccan stuff without outside influence. "Oh, isn't this cute?" "Go away." So I go to this other shop, and the person behind the counter was older and looked like she'd been through a lot, but she was off the beaten path. And I'm looking at stuff and interested in certain things, and she's like, "Oh, so she strikes up a conversation. "Are you Wiccan?" Whatever. "Yes, I am." And she asked, "So what, are you with a certain tradition?" And I'm like, "Well, I'd probably rather not talk about that given what happened to me at the last shop." And this started a massive discussion about the British traditional Wiccans that were like, "You aren't real unless you have been initiated by an initiate, by an initiate, by an initiate." Well, newsflash, I was. But we don't, this is not a thing my tradition really deals with, because we're more about the whole, your behavior today is what's important, not who waved their hand above your head and said, "Poof, you're first degree initiate." That doesn't matter as much as how you are reacting today, how you are today. So lineage doesn't mean a freaking thing if you're an asshole. And, that I think is a very important point.
Or you could be like me and be an asshole without a lineage.
Or you can be like me, an asshole with a lineage. There you go. It's yeah, D Ducky Rex, not that conversation. It's true. I actually had that conversation, and I don't go in with the like, "I'm really important. Look at the letters after and before my name." No, I'm like,
Yeah,
"Does your incense smell good? If yes, I'm gonna buy some." It's a
yeah, no,
thing.
it's the same as in academia. It's the same reason why I kind of moved away from it, because calling yourself an independent researcher is like a big no-no. It's like, oh, you're not academically affiliated. Oh, so you're not with a research institute or with a university. Uh-huh. So you're one of those people. And we all know what those people actually hides. Um,
Not all American pagans are just interested in commerce, Aaron. There are a good number of them, yes, but not all of them. Just look for the Insta Witch, just add water, and you will see the difference.
Yeah, and
You,
the
yeah,
fact that sorry.
yeah. I'm sorry, that just
Yeah, no,
and
and speaking about incense and substances and stuff like this, how many bongs do I need until I get my powers?
bibbity bobbity boo. You are now a an asshole without lineage. Poof. No.
No, but
How many
this
bongs?
yeah, no, this ties into a lot of substance use. I'm not gonna go as far as substance abuse, but substance use in the wider
Mhm.
pagan community, and most of it is people with a genuine addiction trying to frame it in a socially acceptable way. But I know some people who genuinely have had profound personal experience. I wouldn't go as far as calling them religious experiences, but because one of the clients I've worked with closely um, collaborates with a lot of people facilitating ayahuasca sessions or peyote sessions, where but at least unlike most of the people that do that I interacted with, is working with legitimate native practitioners in a respectful, sustainable way without charging 10 grand just to walk you around the Amazon, and with a doctor on hand 24/7, because shocker, certain substances, certain psychoactive substances, as natural as they are, pose a genuine threat if you've got underlying conditions.
Yes, rattlesnake venom is also natural.
Yeah, but
So is
ayahuasca can also
hemlock.
give you, yeah, ayahuasca can give you some powerful visions or a very aggressive heart attack as well.
You know, um, now I will say that certain psychoactive substances will change your. Well, all right. Okay, now we're gonna get into some weird shit. All right. Um, I believe that a lot of true learning can come from a brain interrupt. Okay, it's sort of like a computer interrupt, a control C to your brain that clears the cache for a second, and you can insert something different to be computed upon. A different set of data, you're going to think about it in a different way from that interrupt. Now, can that interrupt be a psychoactive substance? Yes, it can. Can that interrupt be being presented with a truth that shakes your world? Yes. Can that interrupt be in almost any possible form? Yes. So choose your interrupt if you want to learn something new and make different parts of your brain function on it. Some interrupts are wholesome and without a lot of risk. Other interrupts are really difficult, and you need the 24/7 doctor. You need someone to make sure you're not having an allergic reaction. You need a babysitter to make sure you don't step off a building, you know? Take a look at the possible risks versus benefit analysis and then make your choice. Or try to learn in a traditional way. I mean, it's up to you.
I mean, there's this whole discussion in the
Guys are so funny.
yeah, there's this whole discussion in the psychoactive substance community about having a set and a setting for certain things, and the fact that you don't pop an ecstasy pill when you go wash the dishes because it's probably not gonna kick in, and if it's gonna kick in, you're gonna break a couple of dishes and that's it.
And don't drop acid at night when you should be sleeping. I mean, just, I've heard this. Can't tell you where from, but I've heard this.
Yeah,
Just
friend of a
saying.
friend.
Friend of a friend of an initiate to an initiate. The lineage was there, but just saying.
Okay, so
It,
Minion,
it's
it's been close to 4 hours, and it's close to midnight here. It's not the witching hour. Well, depending on who you ask. Should we go to closing statements and then find someone whose day we're gonna probably ruin?
sure. Let's ruin everyone's day. No, but sure. Sure,
Okay,
let's do that.
chat, closing questions, closing statements. Don't ask if Sage is Wiccan Febreze because we kind of figured that one out.
Last call, y'all.
Anybody want a wand?
Can't have mine, damn it. I mean, shit. I'll fight you for that. The begone herb. Yes. Quick, funny story about that. My daughter has certain gifts, and she was able and is able to see things that I can't see, but she can see them. And she was very nervous one night about things that she saw. So I made a spray bottle of Ghost Begone for her out of ground up sage, some lavender, and some blessings of different sorts. And I put it in a little spray bottle and I labeled it Ghost Begone. And I gave it to her, and she's, I'm hearing her throughout the night, squirt, squirt, squirt. And then, snoring a little bit, then squirt, squirt, squirt. Well, maybe 10 years later, she says, Mom, your Ghost Begone did not work. And I just lost it. It was just so funny. Gifts like third eye, yeah, kind of like that, Jessica. She can see dead people. I mean, kind of like the movie. Yeah, we've had some issues there.
I saw dead people once, and then I was politely invited out of the morgue.
I hear you.
Minion, thanks for sharing. Thanks for chatting. I feel like you're gonna be a recurring face around here, and I know you're one of my very loyal chatters and lurkers, as I hope to be one of yours. So, my darling travelers, if you have not dropped the lovely Minion of Discord a cheeky little follow. Actually, let's do this properly. Let me just...
I'm getting nervous now.
I'm more nervous figuring out, first of all, what I broke during the stream, because I've seen a couple of things, and if you see me taking notes, it's probably I fucked something up and mixed it up. And thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you for being a good sport and taking all the cheeky comments from my community in good humor when they were humorous, and for actually learning some stuff. I feel like I've genuinely learned some things. I wasn't as familiar with Wicca as I am now, 4 hours later, after picking your brain.
Thank you, Aaron.
And yeah, I do plan on having this Tales by Tankardlight once per yeah, I'll straighten my bones. God, wait, just give me a second. I plan on having these Tales by Tankardlight once a month. You have been our second willing victim, and I feel that maybe closer to Halloween we'll find some interesting topic that we could, because this was more like scratching the surface. I'm sure we could pick your brain on various other topics. And now the true question of the evening is, who are we going to pester? Let me quick little look.
I'll send you my recommendation, my suggestion, not recommendation, suggestion.
Let's see if any of my people, who of my people are here, and if virtualizing my camera wouldn't just bring my browser to its knees, it would be fun. Fortunately, none of my witchy people are on, and not a lot of my people are on tonight. I don't think I've ever raided Spirit, to be honest. First time for everything.
One
guessing.
topic of discussion going forward, the relationship of music to ritual.
That's not a 4-hour talk. That's a 6-hour talk.
You are correct.
Yeah, one of our next talks might be about music, and one of our next collabs might actually end up being a jam session, but I'm not promising anything.
No, Aaron, no.
Okay,
there are plenty of mainstream music pieces out there that are actually pagan hymns. We don't need to. Yeah.
Yes, tell the guy who's been playing music from the 1200s of the pagan undertones and non-religious music. Anyway, yeah, okay. Let's go see Spirit, because I think it's gonna be fun. Spirit is a wonderful musician. And a good friend of both Minion and our good friend and lovely VIP, Mr. Orbe. So, with all that being said and done, thanks again, Minion. Guys, do make sure to drop both Minion and the lovely D Ducky a cheeky little follow, and let's pull up raid messages if I actually hit the right button this time. So feel free to pick up a raid message. The first one is for subs, the second one is for followers, and join me in causing a little chaos.
Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you very, very much and hope to see you again very soon.
Fine Spirits channel. You have no idea how slow my what.
I got a message saying that his raid settings do not allow a raid at this time.
Probably just
do you have
testing
the same
stuff out. Yeah, because I see his stream titles testing stuff out, so he might have just blocked
we may need someone different.
Okay, I'm willing to take suggestions from chats, because let me see who's on my end, because I just looked for my witchy people, and that was a quick checklist.
Oops, I just dropped my mouse.
If you guys have any suggestions, let me see who's on. We could raid your parrots just for kicks and giggles. But no, let's raid an actual person. Let's raid an actual person.
That would be better.
So who? Yeah, the problem is I don't have a lot of friends on. Yeah, no, I can't raid Spirit either. This is folks in my list are musicians. I mean, both Minion and I are musicians, and Spirit was our Spirit is a musician. So if you guys want to suggest musicians or witchy people or and she kept Happy Feet, who's playing Pump It Up dance game. Legitimately have no one to raid. To be fair, it's a little early for me to raid out, and most of my usual raid targets are on vacation. I was like, oh look, Minion's on. Chat suggestions, ideas.
Spirit is trying to fix it so we can raid.
Okay, then we'll raid Spirit. And I need to fix my freaking camera. To be surprised, I had no camera issues up until now, so I'm mildly proud about it.
I took the spell off. It's all good.
Let me see. How do you do this raid thing? What is this raid thing? I am a pro streamer. I'm a professional mouthful air breather. I can do this. You literally messaged him while he was live?
Of course.
Once a troll, always a troll.
He's trying to change his settings. This is pretty interesting.
The problem is, like I said, the virtualization and streaming together.
This is so silly.
Starting the raid now. And pretty much ready when you are, minion.
Oh, where are we going?
The spirits.
Oh, I still can't get in. Can you actually get in?
Yeah, I started the raid. I've got the raid lined up.
Oh, okay.
Tell me when to press the button, because I only have 1 minute.
You go and I'll bring my folks over when we can.
Okay. Then with all that being said, thank you again, minion, and I will see you guys on Wednesday.